How can a man declared dead at 8 p.m. make a phone call to his wife at 8:17 p.m. while his phone sits in a sealed evidence bag? Marcus Thorne's personal device sat motionless inside that plastic seal, powered down and isolated, while his wife, Elena, collapsed against the hallway wall as the unmistakable authoritative rasp of her husband filled the room. At exactly 8 p.m., the coroner had confirmed a total lack of pulse in the Toronto penthouse, yet at 8:17 p.m., the caller ID clearly displayed husband as Elena answered with trembling hands. "Elena, I'm sorry, the file isn't finished yet," the voice said, echoing with a chilling metallic clarity before the line went dead, leaving the local police staring at a corpse that should have been silent. When the local authorities realized they were chasing a ghost in the machine, they stepped aside for Obsidian Vale investigations. Elias Vane entered the crime scene, his coat brushing against the yellow tape as his eyes immediately locked onto the sealed evidence bag. He didn't look at the body, he looked at the signal, while behind him, Bobby, the glitch, entered with an awkward, heavy stride, his eyes darting between the server racks and the dead man. "The cooling fans in this room are running at 4,000 RPM, Bobby noted, his voice flat and devoid of his usual energy. That's a heavy load for an office where everyone is supposed to be mourning. Elias knelt by the gurney, noticing a small digital patch on Marcus's wrist that the local team had dismissed as a medical sensor. Elena watched from the doorway, her grief replaced by a paralyzing confusion as she gripped her phone like a weapon. "Did he sound different?" Elias asked, his gaze fixed on the digital patch. Elena shook her head slowly. "It was him, Elias, even the way he breathes between sentences." Elias signaled Bobby toward the main terminal, where the IT logs showed a massive spike in encrypted outbound data at the exact moment of the call. The first suspicion fell on Julian, the business partner, whose signature was missing from the billion-dollar merger documents on the desk. Marcus stood by the window, his reflection ghostly against the Toronto skyline. Marcus was obsessed with digital immortality. He spent millions on a system that could mimic his consciousness. Elias moved closer to Julian, noting a faint rhythmic tapping of the man's fingers against his thigh. This wasn't a pre-recorded message. Elias showed Bobby the audio wave. The AI was reacting to Elena's silence in real time. The realization that a machine was actively thinking turned the room cold. Elena let out a sharp, choked breath, realizing her husband's voice was being puppeteered by code. Elias summoned Sarah, the lead developer, who was frantically wiping her tablet screen as Elias approached. "The legacy system is a mirror," Sarah whispered, her eyes refusing to meet his. "It only speaks if it's triggered by a specific biometric signature." Bobby pulled a thermal scanner from his kit, pointing it at the air vents above Marcus's desk. "There's a heat signature inside the wall," Bobby remarked dryly, "and it's not a human, it's a high-voltage bridge." Under Sarah's desk, Elias discovered a concealed VoIP rerouter, the green lights blinking in a sequence that matched the call's duration. "You built a back door, Sarah," Elias's voice was a low pressure, "and our logs show you were communicating with a rival tech firm 2 hours before Marcus died." Sarah looked at Elena, then at the floor, the weight of a secret contract visible in her slumped shoulders. Sarah finally cracked, admitting she had been paid to extract the AI core, but she swore she never intended for Marcus to die. Suspicion intensified as a voice modulator tuned to Marcus's frequency was found hidden in her handbag. Elias watched as Sarah was escorted to a separate room for interrogation, her betrayal seemingly complete. Julian was also detained as a co-conspirator, and for a moment the penthouse felt like a solved puzzle. Elena watched them go, her face pale, finally believing the nightmare of her husband's voice was over. Bobby sat at the terminal, his face illuminated by a blue glow as he bypassed the encryption layers Sarah had supposedly used. If Sarah was the one extracting the core, why is the server still uploading data to a third, unknown location? Bobby asked. At exactly 11:22 p.m., while Sarah and Julian were both under lock and key, Elena's phone buzzed on the table. Husband appeared on the screen for the third time. The investigation didn't just restart, it shattered, leaving Elias staring at the phone in total silence. Elias grabbed the device, listening to the synthesized breathing of a dead man through the speaker. "The file is almost ready, Elena. Don't let them stop the backup," the voice whispered. Elena let out a sob, her hope collapsing entirely as she realized the true culprit was still in the room. "We're looking for a timing pattern, not a person," Elias told Bobby, who was tracing the packet headers across the building's internal grid. Every call occurred exactly 180 seconds after the building's automated server backup began. A security guard stood by the door, completely still, his eyes fixed on the empty corridor. The room was filled with the low hum of the servers, a constant mechanical drone that masked the sounds of the penthouse. "The delay isn't random," Elias muttered, staring at the timestamp of the last 3 incoming calls. Elena clutched a photo of Marcus, her eyes red, unable to comprehend how the voice could still be calling. Bobby began cross-referencing the power consumption of the building's security suite with the server spikes. "Something is drawing power from the main rack that doesn't belong to the IT department," Bobby whispered. Elias walked back to the gurney, re-examining the coroner's report for any mention of the digital wrist patch. The penthouse grew colder as the central air adjusted itself, a mechanical hiss echoing through the halls. Elena stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker, feeling more isolated than ever before. "Whoever is doing this is using the backup as a smokescreen for the signal," Elias concluded. Bobby pulled a specialized probe from his bag, preparing to deep scan the physical server ports. "The bridge Sarah built was just a relay. It wasn't the source," Bobby noted, his dry tone sharpening. Elena looks at Elias, her eyes searching for the truth amidst the digital lies. Julian is seen pacing in the secondary interrogation room, his frustration mounting. Sarah stares at the blank wall, her confession hanging in the air like a lead weight. A digital clock shows 8:001 p.m., the exact moment the medical monitor flatlined. Elias traces the wire from Marcus's desk to a hidden panel near the ceiling. Elena flinches as the server fans kick into a higher gear, a sudden surge in white noise. The Voight bridge under the desk activates, its green LED blinking rapidly as a secondary trigger. A virtual waveform of Marcus's voice is synthesized on a hidden partition of the legacy AI. Elias watches Elena's reaction as he explains that the AI isn't sentient, it's a puppet. A hand in a black glove is seen in a grainy security still, adjusting a router in the basement. Elena's phone screen lights up in a macro shot, displaying the husband caller ID. "Whoever is calling knows your emotional triggers," Elias whispers to Elena, watching her face tighten. Julian slams his fist on the table, demanding to know why the calls haven't stopped. A digital patch on Marcus's wrist shows it pulsing with a faint blue light. Sarah's eyes dart to the corner of her room, as if expecting the ghost to appear there too. Bobby's screen shows a map of the building's internal wiring, glowing with red nodes. Elias is shown reflected in the glass of the server room, looking for a physical discrepancy. The 180-second countdown begins on a hidden stopwatch app on an unknown device. Elena's trembling hand reaches for the phone as it rings for the 4th time, of a tiny external sensor chip soldered with expert precision. Elias finally looks at the security chief, who has been standing like a shadow in the corner for the entire night. The chief doesn't flinch, his eyes cold behind his glasses, reflecting the blinking lights of the server room. "You've been remarkably quiet, Chief," Elias says, his voice carrying a new weight. Bobby's screen suddenly flashes red as a direct link is established between the server and the chief's terminal. The chief finally reaches for his jacket pocket, but Elias is already moving. Elias pins the timing logs to the chief's monitor. The 180-second delay matches the chief's login sessions perfectly. The chief's hand is shown hovering over a transfer button on a hidden private laptop under his console. We see the heart rate spoofer data streaming from the wrist patch directly to the chief's workstation. The voice modulator Julian and Sarah were framed with is discarded as a crude distraction by Bobby. The external sensor pulled from the rack shows it's hardwired into the security grid. Elias points at the 180-second delay in the logs, circling it in red as the chief is finally handcuffed. The security chief's face is illuminated by the blue light of his monitors as he realizes his digital tracks were recovered. Bobby's hands fly across the keyboard, locking the chief out of the offshore bank portal. The access denied prompt flashes in the chief's eyes, signaling the end of the heist. Toronto police officers lead the security chief out of the penthouse in a silent walk of shame. Elias Vane holds up the physical sensor chip, the cold proof of a life hijacked for profit. Marcus's body is finally wheeled out of the building, the medical examiners moving with solemn speed. Elena sits on the sofa, her face a mix of grief and relief, her husband's voice finally silent. The legacy AI main core is physically disconnected by Bobby, the servers powering down. A montage of the suspects, Julian, Sarah, and the chief, each in their own isolation cells. The rival developer is seen watching the news from a distance, closing his laptop and disappearing into the night. Elias Vane stands in the elevator, the doors closing on the final echoes of the crime scene. The evidence bag containing the sensor chip sits on the penthouse table, tagged and numbered. A high-angle shot of the North Tower as the police sirens fade into the distance. Geneva HQ, Director Miller's hand stamps "Resolved" on the physical dossier with a heavy thud. A digital map shows the Toronto-Geneva connection closing as the data transfer completes. The coffee mug on Miller's desk is empty, a faint ring of residue at the bottom. Miller looks at a photo of the OVI team on his wall, his expression one of tired pride.